So let's recite this verse a few times. I'll explain the meaning first, then we can recite it and then we'll discuss. So this verse tells how we can all be our own spiritual masters. So this is coming in Krishna's Bhagavad-Gita. We'll discuss that. Let me explain the meaning. Atmano Gurur Atmaiva. So Atmano, the soul, is the Guru. The soul is the Guru of the soul. Atma is the Guru of the Atma. Purushasya Visheshataha. This is not an ordinary situation, some special situation it is. So it's not that Krishna is telling there's no need for a spiritual master. Visheshataha, for a person in a special situation. What is that situation? Yat pratyakshanumana abhyam. So we know pratyaksha and anuman are the ways of acquiring knowledge. So by pratyaksha and anuman abhyam, what happens? Shreyo savanu vindate, anuvindate, one attains. What? Shreya. Shreya is one's long-term benefit. So let's see how this happens. Let's recite the verse. Atmano gururatmaiva, Atmano gururatmaiva, Purushasya visheshataha, Yat pratyakshanumana abhyam, Shreyo savanu vindate, Atmano gururatmaiva, Purushasya visheshataha, Yat pratyakshanumana abhyam, Shreyo savanu vindate, Atmano gururatmaiva, Purushasya visheshataha, Yat pratyakshanumana abhyam, Shreyo savanu vindate. Anyone like to recite? Atmano gururatmaiva, Purushasya visheshataha, Yat pratyakshanumana abhyam, Shreyo savanu vindate. Mahaprabhu. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, yeah.
Atmano gururatmaiva,
Purushasya visheshataha, Yat pratyakshanumana abhyam,
Shreyo savanu vindate.
Okay. Hare Krishna. So I welcome all of you today for this discussion on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the Srimad Bhagavatam has 335 chapters, out of which the longest canto is the 10th canto, which has 90 chapters. Apart from that, two of the longer cantos are 3rd and 11th canto. So just as Krishna spoke the Bhagavad-Gita, similarly Krishna spoke another Gita, that is called as the Uddhav-Gita. He spoke this as his last instruction before he departed from the world. And he spoke this to Uddhava. So whatever is being spoken over here, this is Krishna speaking to Uddhava. In fact, in 7th chapter itself, the Uddhav-Gita starts and it goes on till 30th chapter. So almost 25 chapters are there in the Uddhav-Gita. And it's the longest philosophical section in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The philosophy is there throughout the Bhagavatam, but at a consistent level, in terms of systematic, progressive analysis, this is the longest philosophical section of the Bhagavatam. So, let's see what Lord Krishna is telling over here. So, the Bhagavad-Gita is often called as Krishna's song, and the Uddhav-Gita is Krishna's other song. It's a lesser known song, but it's also a very important instruction. And Krishna is telling over here, Atmano gururatmaiva, that all of us, that the soul can be the spiritual master of the soul. Purushasya visheshataha, in some special situations, or when the soul is in some ways specially qualified. And what does that mean? Yat pratyakshanumana abhyam. So normally we acquire knowledge by pratyaksha and anuman. So, Pratyaksha Anuman can also be used. Shreyo asav anuvindate. Because Pratyaksha and Anuman can also at times reveal Shreya to us. So, Shreya and prayer, as we know, is long-term spiritual benefit or short-term material benefit. Now, Darwin had the idea of survival of the fittest. So, now, if we observe material nature, it does seem true at one level. There is severe competition, and when this severe competition, actually, those who are the fittest, they survive. Of course, Srila Prabhupada had another refutation for Darwin's theory. He said survival of the fittest is not true because even the fittest don't survive. Ultimately, nobody survives in this world. Everybody has to die. But in terms of relative longevity, yes, the fittest survive. However, if we look at our human existence and our human nature, then we will see that it is not the fittest who appeal to the heart. Now, what is it? Yes, the strongest person, the fittest person, that may appeal to the heart. That person may win the laurels, earn the most money, or have the maximum number of, say, records or whatever. But actually, rather than survival of the fittest, what appeals to the human heart is sacrifice by the fittest. When the Twin Towers were collapsing, at that time, there were firefighters who went inside, knowing that they were going to risk their lives. And they risked their lives so that people could come out. The people could be rescued. And they are considered heroes. And similarly, whenever somebody is in danger and another person risks one's life for saving that person, that is completely contrary to the idea of evolution. Isn't it? Now, why should I risk my life for somebody else? If all of our goal is to survive, and if somebody else is drowning, then if I can get out, let me get out. Why should I bother about the other person? So now, in fact, this is one of the most important arguments for the existence of God. There are 4 philosophical arguments. What we discuss in our Discover Yourself course is only one of them, design argument. There is the design argument, there is the cosmological argument, there is the moral argument, and then there is the teleological argument. So the moral argument states that actually from the evolutionary point of view, if evolution itself were the reality, there would be no reason or rationale for morality. Animals just act for their survival. We humans also act for our survival, but that is not what primarily drives us. That means, yes, it drives many people, but that is not what draws the admiration of people. Yes, somebody working for survival, that's good. But somebody sacrificing, that attracts the heart much more. So now evolutionists have very little explanation. They say that actually this is just some survival gene misfiring. So they consider the highest moral instincts as the survival genes misfiring, which is a very sad and reductionistic way of looking at the most ennobling instincts of man, of humanity at large. So here we all have a sense of we have a higher sense. So the idea of survival of the fittest is right when we consider our lower nature. See, we have a lower nature and we have a higher nature. Evam buddhe param buddhva samsthabhyatmanam atmanah jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. In 3.43, Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita, therefore, use your intelligence and situate yourself in your higher nature. Evam buddhe. Using your intelligence, param buddhva, understand that you are transcendental. And then, jahi shatrum mahabaho, and the formidable enemy that is there, that is selfishness, material lust, conquer over that. So there is this inner war within us, the higher nature and the lower nature. And as far as our lower nature is concerned, the survival of the fittest is true for the lower nature. Yes, if we were just animals, that Darwin's theory has this human beings are what? Just smart apes who learn to walk upright. That is their idea, that's all. If we were just that, then we would not have a higher nature. The nature of sacrificing oneself for someone else. Now, why we are discussing this? It is this higher nature which can act as our guru. This verse is saying, Purushasya Visheshataha. In some special situations, the soul can be the guru of the soul. But when is that? When that soul can pursue Shreya. Shreya means long-term good. How does the soul pursue Shreya? Pratyakshanumanabhyam. Through Pratyaksha and through Anuman. So, by our observation and by our inference, also we can see that scripture's truths are true. So, I daily write an article on the Bhagavad-Gita, which I publish on my website, one of my websites, Gita Daily. So here you will see something. Experience, it's a little blurred. Okay. Experience is intelligence rear light. And scripture is front light. So you will see this picture. You can roughly see this vague outline over here. So that represents the person. The vehicle is the intelligence. The person is the rider. Now a vehicle has a front light and a rear light. Front light shows us something before we reach it. And the rear light will show us after we have gone through it. So if there is a pothole, seeing it with the rear light is not of much use. Now I have already got a jolt because of it. But if I see it with my front light, then I can avoid it. So, scripture is for the journey of our life like a front light. Now, by scripture, we can come to know what we will face in our life. What will be the consequences of our choices. And then we can make wise choices based on that. But is accepting scripture just a matter of blind faith? No. If one doesn't accept it, one doesn't use the front lights, turns off the front light, and one goes through a pothole, then still all of us have intelligence. And by our intelligence, we can look back, there was a jolt over there. That's because there's a pothole. Okay. That means on this road there might be potholes. Let me be careful in the future. So actually, if we see another significant difference between humans and animals is the capacity for learning and the capacity for passing on learning. What does it mean? See, all of us, there is something called as inherited characteristics and there is something called acquired characteristics. Inherited characteristics come through the genes. And acquired characteristics is what we learn. Now, if we go from among the 8.4 billion species, from the lowest to the highest, one of the differences is the percentage of the acquired characteristics that can be learned is tremendously higher. See, whether we are humans or animals, we will get something inherited. We get a complexion which is similar to our parents, and we get a lot of things by our genes. But the genes don't define the complete person. There are twins. Now, they may be genetically identical. Among twins, there are two kinds of twins. There are monozygotic and bizygotic. Monozygotic means actually they got exact same gene content in the same egg is split into two. So even the same zygote is split into two, something like that, monozygotic. So that means the same genetic content from the male and the female has come together and that has split into two. So now if we were completely determined by our genes, then the two twins who are monozygotic should be completely identical. But they are not. Generally twins have remarkably similar physical characteristics. But even if somebody doesn't believe in the soul, at the level of mental characteristics, they are often quite different. One may be introvert, the other may be extrovert. One may be a little bit intellectual, the other may be a little bit more emotional. There can be so many differences. So now what? And even if one doesn't accept the spiritual existence of any spiritual dimension, still there is a difference in the mental dimension. Where does this difference in mental dimension come from? Because our whole personality is not determined by our genes. See, so if I was a soul in this body, then I die, then I come into the next body. So the law of karma arranges things in such a way that when I go from this body to the next body, that whatever karmic characteristics I am supposed to acquire in my next life, I get parents who will give me that kind of karmic characteristics. So for example, say if a fair complexion is considered to be a result of good karma. I'm just giving an example over here. So then, if somebody has done a karma by which the person is supposed to get fair complexion, then that soul will go into a body, a male and female body, by which the genes will be such that the person will get the fair complexion. So that means the karmic pathway includes as a subset the genetic pathway. So our karmas determine the kind of genes that we will get. But the genes don't determine, genes are physical. They don't affect the subtle body. When the soul goes from one body to the next body, the soul carries the subtle body with it. And therefore, the characteristics determined by the subtle body are different even in twins. That's why the mental characteristics are different. So again, what is the relevance of this point which we are discussing? The relevance is that the difference between animals and humans. We understand it's dharmo hi tesham adhiko vishesho. Now dharma is not just the capacity to do some puja or the capacity to chant some mantra. Even parrots can be made to chant Hare Krishna. If a monkey is trained, monkey can also hold aarti plate and move aarti plate around. No, dharma refers to the capacity for philosophical inquiry. The capacity for inquiring about the higher truths of life. Capacity for inquiring about Shreya. So the word dharma has different meanings. And in this context, it says Shreya. So with our Pratyaksha and Anuman, we can either search for prayers or we can search for Shreyas. That means we are souls in human bodies. And when we search for prayers, that means we search for better arrangements for eating, sleeping, mating and defending. Now, animals also eat, sleep, mate and defend. But it's interesting that animals don't labor too much to try to improve these things. They will labor to get those things. A cow will eat grass, but a cow will not think that, okay, maybe I should cook the grass and put some spice in it, and then it will taste better. Why? Because it is more or less running by instincts, which come from the genes. So, if we compare, say, if the 100% is the characteristics that a living entity has, then in the lower species, almost 80 to 90% of their characteristics are inherited characteristics. And a very small percent, 10% is acquired characteristics. Whereas, with respect to human beings, we get inherited characteristics, but our acquired characteristics are very significant. In fact, if we try to exercise our will consciously and determinedly, then our acquired characteristics can completely circumvent or counter our inherited characteristics. That means, say, if a person had been born to parents who were, say, alcoholics. So not only the alcoholic addicts, but they say the mother was even drinking alcohol when she was pregnant. Now that can have some biological effects also. It's harmful for pregnancy. But, so that kind of thing is something which is just there in the culture. Of course, here I'm not talking primarily about inherited characteristics into alcoholism. It's a psychological characteristic. But you're talking about the upbringing over here. So, the point is, that is also almost like an acquired characteristic. It's almost like an inherited characteristic. Sorry, not acquired, inherited characteristic. It's not inherited through the genes. Alcoholism is not in the genes. But it is almost like the culture is such that it comes in. But we can change that. So the acquired characteristics that we can acquire, they are much, much greater. So another example could be, say, both the mother and the father are very irritable. The child will be disposed towards irritability. But the child can change that. It can change that. The parents may be in Rajoguna and Tamoguna, but the child can, by conscious exertion of the free will, become Sattvic. Develop characteristics in the mode of goodness. How does this happen? Because the acquired or learned characteristics that are there in humans, they can be a lot. And these learned characteristics are what actually make humans humans. Now, this learning we see exhibited to a dazzling degree in the material field today. So science and technology has its advances which are remarkable. And where credit is due, credit should be given. So the scientists and the technologists, they have exercised their brain tremendously to come up with all the marvels of technology that we see around us. So the fact that there is use of intelligence is undeniable. But also to be considered is, what is the purpose for the use of this intelligence? So Shreyo Asav Shreyo Asav Anuvindate. Shreyo Asav Anuvindate. So with so now let's try to visualize this. Here is the soul, around that is the subtle body, and around is the gross body, and then there is the world around. Now soul can use the higher nature to inquire about the higher, bigger truths of life. Or the soul can succumb to the lower nature and use the intelligence for inquiring more and more about eating, sleeping, mating, defending. So now, in some ways, technology and science can be said to be value neutral. They can be used, so people, if they want, they can go on the internet and they can search for spiritual information. Or they can search for sensually titillating stimuli. Both are possible. Now, if people are left to themselves, most of them would succumb to their lower nature. And then, although the possibility is there, the probability is rare. See, possibility is whether it can happen. Probability means whether it is likely to happen. So the possibility of using technology for a higher purpose is there definitely. But the probability is less. Because people are governed by their lower instincts unless they get some education and training to develop their higher instincts. So Atmaiva Gurur Atmaiva. Atmano Gurur Atmaiva. So when can the Atma become the Guru of the Atma? When a person acts according to one's higher nature and starts using the Pratyaksha and Anuman to perceive spiritual truth. So the classic example of this could be Buddha. The Buddha was a young man. He had practically everything that most young people dream about. He was a prince who was going to inherit the mantle of kinghood. He had a beautiful wife and he had a healthy body. He had everything enjoyable. But then what happened? He went out. And most of us know the story. He went around and his father had protected him because there had been a prophecy during before his birth that either he will become a great king or he will become a great saint. His father was a king and he wanted him to become a king. So he said, generally people take to spirituality when they see the miseries of this world. So I will not expose him to any miseries. So he never saw anything. But then, one day, he went out with his charioteer and he saw a sick person. And then he saw an old person. And then he saw a funeral procession. And what Krishna says, Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. So 13.9 what Krishna says in the Gita, he saw that. And that created a thunderous spiritual awakening within him. He said, this is what my ultimate destiny is. Yes, I'm going to grow old, get sickly, and become a corpse. If that is the case, then what is the point of life? Doesn't life have any higher purpose? So in this case, what happened? There was Pratyaksha. So he saw an old person, he saw a sick person. And then there was Anuman also. There were so many other people who have seen sick people, who have seen old people. But then their Anuman, it is not looking for Shreya. It is looking for prayers. So for example, there are many hospitals. Bhaktivedanta Hospital is an honorable exception to the trend. But there are many hospitals where doctors see the suffering of the patients, but rather than thinking, oh, I am also going to suffer like this, some doctors think that, how can I make more money out of this suffering? Maybe I can ask for more tests to be done, do this CT scan, do this X-ray, do this, do that, or maybe we can do some surgery which is not actually required. How we can fleece money out of it. So what is happening? There when the pratyaksha comes, the anuman, this doesn't mean mental speculation. Pratyaksha refers to the use of our sensory faculty, and anuman refers to use of our mental faculty. So we can use our mental faculty in a way that is anukul to our spiritual realization, or we can use it in a way that is pratikul to our spiritual realization. So somebody who sees suffering and thinks, how can I make money out of the suffering? What is happening? That person is doing anuman, pratyaksha is coming, but the anuman is about not shreya, it is about prayers. So how can I make more? How can I enjoy more out of this? So therefore, that's why it's purushasya visheshataha. It's only for in some special situations or among special people that by pratyaksha and anuman they can look for shreya. They can turn towards their long-term good. Now, what does it take? Now, when we say we should rely on Shabda, because Shabda is authoritative, that is definitely true. It is authoritative. But we cannot close our eyes or close our mind from thinking. Isn't it? We cannot shut it down. So then, how do we use our pratyaksha? We cannot close our eyes. So we are going to see some things with our eyes. And whenever we see something, there are some thoughts that are going to come. So our spiritual advancement will largely depend on our capacity to make our pratyaksha and anuman anukul to our bhakti. To the extent we are able to make our pratyaksha and anuman anukul, favorable to our bhakti, to that extent our realizations will deepen. To that extent we will become more insightful and we will make wise choices which will lead to rapid spiritual advancement. So going back to this now, here when I said this, so now scripture is intelligence front light. That means by scripture we can know in advance. The world will promise us so many pleasures. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkhayonaya evate. Krishna says, don't engage in them because they will lead to misery. Dukkhayonaya, they are wombs of misery. But what happens is our mind itself gets tempted to those things, and today's culture is tempting us all the more. Today, so one devotee friend recently sent me a book. He said this is written by an American psychologist. It is directed towards parents, and the title of the book is How to Not Become Your Children's ATM. He's telling parents how to not become your children's ATM. So in that book is described that how since the 80s there has been systematic sinister propaganda in the advertising industry to target young minds, to target teens, and they call it, before that they were called as tweens. Those are in between the teens and the childhood. So to target the children, to target those who are tweens, and to target those who are teens. So what is the reason for this? Because at that time people don't have so much discriminatory capacity. So the children, our spiritual faculty is there. But in children they are mostly mild and very little intelligence. That's why anything goes wrong they will cry. And once they see something, I just want it. I want it. So what happens is their rational faculty is not developed. And if at that time they are seduced into getting attracted to something, then they just don't listen to reason. And the whole advertising industry is there. It's a whole big racket. There are documentaries made about it. There are books written about it. And parents find it very difficult because they don't want to say no to their children, but at the same time they can't say yes to everything the child wants. So what is happening over here? The culture is drawing out the children's lower nature. So children see one toy, I just want this toy. And then they will see some cartoon show, and in the cartoon show, now what is happening is within cartoon shows, they will show the popular cartoon characters espousing certain brands. Maybe they drink a Coke, or they use a particular brand of or the particular vehicle or a particular product. And I think I have to take that. And that's how the children just get caught in more and more and more. So unfortunately, our culture, it is working in a very sinister way to draw out our lower nature. To draw out our lower nature. And perhaps the most insidious means most dangerous, most evil-minded example of this is the whole porn industry. Now see, the biggest problem there are various kinds of addictions. So porn is one kind of addiction. Now the danger is that for all other addictions, people have to spend time, energy and money to get the addicted object. Get the object of addiction. If somebody is a smoker, somebody is a drunkard, then that person has to go to a place to shop or to drink or to get a cigarette to smoke. But when a person is addicted to obscene images, then that is practically available everywhere now. Now internet is coming everywhere, and once internet comes everywhere, then actually people require time, energy and money to avoid this, not to get to this. Now, especially with respect to almost all computers nowadays, whether it's Windows or Mac, they come with parental control. Why? Because parents are very concerned that our children should not get exposed to these kind of things. Now, of course, it's not just children. Actually, this kind of thing, anyone getting exposed to it is bad. Anyone getting exposed to it is bad. And there are many people who are married and they are addicted to this, and their marriages fall apart because of that. Because their minds are so agitated and stimulated by wild fantasies that even if they have some real life sexual gratification, that just pales in comparison, and people just become crazy. So what is people, if you have to install parental control, have some filters, it requires time, it requires energy, it requires money. So that's why it's a very dangerous trap. This is the worst of all addictions, and in fact the way it is growing is very alarming. So the point over here is that there is this cultural attempt to draw out our lower nature, and that's why by our protection anuman, whether shreyo asavanu vindate, whether we will pursue shreya, it's difficult to say. But in principle, that possibility is there for all of us. So in the initial stages of our spiritual life, what we do is we focus on understanding Shabda properly. So we focus on acquiring spiritual knowledge through Shabda, and then as we internalize Shabda more and more, we realize the truth of Shabda, then Pratyaksha and Anuman, then we start seeing, okay, this is true, it makes sense. So now if we look back, there are many times when temptations come in our life and we are just not able to resist those temptations. And we may succumb to the temptations. So we may fall down, but we don't have to fall away. There's a difference between falling down and falling away. Falling down means we succumb to our temptations, but falling away means after succumbing to temptations, we give up our practice of devotional service. So after we fall down, we can always get up. But if we fall away, that means we become so discouraged. I think this is not for me. I can't practice this. So we fall away. So we shouldn't fall away. What will make the difference between falling down and falling away? That will depend on our understanding of how the mind works. Whenever our past conditionings come, we see that it's not that our mind is tormenting us, say lust is tormenting us 24 hours a day. If we have electric current, sometimes in electric current there are spikes. So the spikes, whenever there are spikes, they can be very damaging to machines like computers or any electronic machines. So often there is a spike guard. So when the spikes come, the spikes get moderated out. And the electric current going to the device doesn't affect so much. So our material desires, when they come up, they are also like spikes. There are certain times when the desires become too strong. At that time, resisting is almost impossible. But so at that time, that means there is a pothole over there, but I am so blinded, so in fact I can't see the pothole only. I go into the pothole. So we engage in something wrong, and then after that we're filled with remorse. All that the mind fantasizes, there'll be so much pleasure over here. But what happens is, it's always an anticlimax. There's a little bit pleasure, but there's so much wastage of time, so much contamination of the mind, so much frustration that now this, I was talking about porn addiction, which is there. Now this is not just for some people who are religious and they think, oh, watching porn is immoral. No, people who are even materialists, who don't even believe in God, and they think that enjoying sex is the goal of life. But even they find that this is so addicting that it captures them and drags them down. So the anarthas can ruin a person not just spiritually but also materially. Can ruin a person also materially. Now, when the spikes come, we may be helpless. That means we go right into the pothole. But then, at the very least, what we can do is we can learn from our experience. So if we can't learn from the front light, some people learn neither from the front light nor from the rear light. That means even when they get the experience, what happens after that also? King Yayati says that actually I was Sahasra Varsha Sevanam. I was enjoying sense gratification for 100 years. 100,000 years he was enjoying. And he says, I was never satisfied by it, but still I kept indulging because the hope was now I'll enjoy. So sometimes some people don't even learn from experience. But at the very least, even if say our past conditions come up and as a spike, they blind us. But after that, when the spike has come, it made us do something wrong also, but after that we realize, hey, what happened? Oh, okay, this is how I fell for this. Then at least we can use the rear right to learn. Okay, this is the area where the pothole was there. I shouldn't go over there. And you can look around. Okay, whenever I see something like this, whenever I see some hollow coming up, that means it's likely to be a pothole. So better safe than sorry. So that means from our past experiences, at the very least what we can do is, we can get realization of the scriptural truth. What scripture said is true. And then we can turn on the front light. Sometimes some people have a light in their vehicle but they don't turn it on. Then daytime it's okay, but in night time that can be very dangerous. And this whole material world is tamsoma jyotirgama. It's a place of darkness. So we need the light of scripture for our journey in life. If we don't have the light of scripture, then we are groping in the dark. So it's best if we can learn from scripture, if not, at least learn from experience. So what we can do is, we can use our protection and anuman after the event. Okay, that went wrong. Okay, I did something wrong. Why did it happen? Okay, this was the situation. This was the situation in which this conditioning came up and then I fell prey to it. Then we analyze, okay, what is, so that at least from that we learn. And in the future, we try to avoid those situations. So actually, it is very helpful when spikes are coming to have a spike guard. So what is the spike guard for us in our spiritual life? That spike guard is the devotional culture. And the materialistic culture is not a spike guard, it is a spike generator. Isn't it? There are so many sensory agitating stimuli that come up, that it just generates spikes, wild desires come up. But when we come in devotee association, if possible we are staying in a place where there are devotees, a youth center, then that culture over there itself minimizes our exposure to agitating stimuli, and thereby it acts like a spike guard. So a spike guard is something which helps us. It doesn't stop the spikes, but it blocks the spikes from affecting us. The spikes will go on in the world, but we can block them from reaching us and affecting us. So that's why it's very important to stay in devotee association as much as possible. And not only stay in devotee association, we all will find out that we have our conditionings, our blind spots, our weaknesses. And then, when we know that, we should create our own spike guards. That means, say, if I had a past conditioning because of which, say, I was addicted to watching nasty things on the internet, then better don't keep internet access on the computer, on the cell phone. Nowadays, not on the computer, even cell phone, people have access. So it may be a little more inconvenient when we need to access the net for maybe some other work. Nowadays, so many things happen on net, and it may be required. But then there are software which say allow only restricted access, only selected number of sites, or we can go somewhere else in public where we have access to the sites. So I'm just giving this as an example, but all of us know our conditionings, and we keep our own spike guards. So for example, if I have a tendency to overeat, then I can decide I'll never keep any food with me on a regular basis. So, or I'll keep only food which is not very delicious. Then what happens is, so the external regulation, it is not an absolute protection. Because when I am agitated, I can just throw aside the external regulation and go for it also. But it creates some sort of time interval between the temptation and the transgression. See, if temptation is here, transgression is here. Temptation means when I am agitated. Transgression means that I succumb to it. So, tolerance is the block, is the wall that prevents temptation from becoming transgression. So, temptation is there, transgression is there. What prevents temptation from becoming transgression is tolerance. So, Krishna talks about how temptation leads to tribulation. Temptation leads to misery in 5.22. And 5.23, what does he say? Shaknoti haiva yah sodhum praksharir vimokshanat kama krodhor bhavam vegam sayuktah sasukhi naraha. Shaknoti. Oh Arjuna, if it is possible for you, what? Sodhum. Sodhum means tolerate. Tolerate. Praksharir vimokshanat. As long as you have a body, the battle will go on. But kama krodhor bhavam vegam. The vega, the urges that come because of lust and anger, if you can tolerate them, then sayuktah sasukhi naraha. Such a person is well situated and such a person is happy. Sayuktah sasukhi naraha. So now, as we make spiritual advancement, our capacity to tolerate will increase. That means even when the spike of temptation comes, we say, no, I will not indulge in it. But till our capacity for tolerance has not yet developed, till that time, we can have external spike guards for us. They will also help us to tolerate. And by the tolerance, gradually we will come to the level of transcendence. By tolerance, we will come to transcendence. That means, if we keep just tolerating, saying no, 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 we may all have had some conditioning, some attachments, to which we might have been very attracted in the past. But now, suppose some of us might have been eating meat earlier. But now if somebody offers us meat, it's unlikely that we will be tempted. Why? Because now prasad is such a higher taste that meat, shushtu nishti vanamcha. Yamunacharya says, I spit at the thought of sex desire. We may not be able to spit at that. But we can at least, we feel sometimes stressful when we see people eating meat. Why? Because often, if a devotee practices spiritual life for 1, 2, 3 years, the appeal of meat goes up. So like that, tolerance will breed transcendence over a period of time. But that is possible only when there is tolerance consistently. If I had a pet dog, and I loved the pet dog very much, and then I come to know the dog has got rabies. Now if I get its saliva, if it bites me, I may die. I decide, hey, I don't want this pet dog. I don't feel like killing the pet dog, so I want to drive it away. So go away. Now I have petted the dog, maybe I sat with it, slept with it, and now the dog says, oh, why is he sending me away like this? I don't want to go. And even if he the dog keeps coming back after something. Again he comes back. And then once, twice, thrice, 5 times, we say no. And then finally what happens? This is in a moment of weakness, just fondle the cat. Oh, my master still loves me. And even if after 10 times we say hard, still the dog will not go away. So, lust is like that pet dog. In the past, we have only fondled lust. The whole material civilization is all about increasing the lust. That's what people are trying to invent, ways to increase lust and enjoy. And now we understand how it's dangerous. So now we say, go away. But when we say go away, what happens? We say it half-heartedly. And because of that, because we say it half-heartedly, once, twice, thrice, 4, 5 times we say no, and then one time we say yes. And then, oh, Master still loves me. And after that doesn't go away. So actually, Krishna says in 15.5 in the Bhagavad-Gita, Nirman moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha. He says vinivritta kamaha. Kama, what do you have to do? Nivritta is retire. Vinivritta means permanent retirement, special retirement. No coming back, no recruitment again. So we need to retire from lust before lust will retire from us. We need to retire from lust, no more indulgence. Then gradually lust will retire from us. So therefore, now this may seem very difficult. Now it's not at all lust is bad. No, there is grahastha ashram and there is a legitimate way, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. These 4 are the purusharthas in life. But the way lust is kindled in today's culture, unless even a person who is a grahastha has to have some amount of regulation. According to most surveys in America, an average American has between 10 to 20 extramarital affairs. So, it's just, even marriage is no safety. Because when people are kindled like that, they just go around indulging in it in a very licentious way. So, anybody that may be, one has to control oneself. So, one shouldn't think that just marriage is the way to control sex. That is one way. That is also one kind of spike guard. Isn't it? That's also one. Yeah. Okay, there is a legitimate way in which one can enjoy. Therefore then, one has some control there. But that alone is not going to solve the problem. We have to develop self-control. And that is possible. So, when we hear from scripture, then pratiksha anumanabhyam. It's not just that we hear from scripture and accept it blind. No, we think about it. And when we observe the world, we try to see from the world what are the things that confirm scriptural truths. It's not that we have to go around doing a sightseeing of the world to see if I can find something that confirms scriptural truths. No, in the course of our life journey itself, when we come out across certain things, we ponder over them. And thereby, what will happen is, we will be able to see the scriptural truths demonstrated in our life. Demonstrated through the bad choices that others are making, and when they face the consequences, demonstrated through some of the bad choices that we make and when we get the consequences, and demonstrated sometimes by the bad choices that we avoid, and thereby the trouble we save ourselves from. So in this way, we can become our own gurus. What does it mean? That we hear from our guru, we hear from Guru Sadhu Shastra, and then we direct our Pratiksha Anuman accordingly and try to understand how this is true. And in that way, what we have learned from scripture will become demonstrated, will become vindicated, confirmed through what we experience in life. And in that way, our conviction will become very deep and we will make rapid spiritual advancement. To the extent we can become our own spiritual masters. That means, now this is not in defiance of our spiritual master, it is in continuance of what he is teaching. Defiance means I reject the spiritual master and think I owe myself no. No, we all need a guru because by default our Pratiksha and Anuman will go towards sense gratification. That's how it is. So our guru, spiritual master, will train us, okay, how we can think spiritually. Once we get that training, then we can turn and move forward in our spiritual lives. So Pratiksha Anumanabhyam, by our Pratiksha Anuman, there will be continuance of what we are learning from scripture. And then our life will become a daily ongoing education where we learn more and more about the truths of Krishna, and our devotion to Krishna will become deeper and stronger. And ultimately, we will transcend the material temptations and transcend material existence itself and return back to Krishna. So I'll summarize. I started by talking about how we can be our own gurus in special situations. And for that, I mentioned how we have a lower nature and a higher nature. The higher nature looks for Shreya, for spiritual truths and for long-term benefit, and that can confirm the scriptural truths, and that's how we can become our guru. But we have a lower nature, and that is what impels us towards eating, sleeping, mating, defining. That's what impels us towards survival for the fittest. Then we discussed how the lower nature is not our complete nature. Apart from our inherited characteristics, we have acquired characteristics, learned characteristics. And this capacity for learning is much more in human beings than in animals. And to the extent we learn, we can counter or curb the influence of our acquired characteristics. And that learning is what is facilitated by scripture. When we hear from Guru Sadhu Shastra, if we can immediately apply it, we can see the dangers in life and avoid the temptations, knowing that they will cause trouble. But even if that doesn't happen, then at least we can, after the event, become wise. Oh, this was what I did wrong. Let me avoid that. So it can be our rear light. And then if we can't learn from scripture as the front light of the intelligence, we can learn from intelligence as the rear light of the intelligence. And then I discussed about spike guards. How our material conditionings, the temptations come as spikes, surcharges of tempting energy. So even if we succumb to it, we may fall down, but we don't have to fall away. We can learn from it and avoid those situations. So one way to avoid it is by having a spike guard. So the devotional culture is like a spike guard that protects us. And then lastly, we discussed about how transcendence is the means to, tolerance is the means to transcendence. So between temptation and transgression is the wall of tolerance. And as we keep building that wall higher and higher and higher, then the temptation won't come only. Then we go to transcendence, and it will all happen gradually. But we can hear from scripture and try as much as possible to use our sensory and our mental faculties to see the scriptural truths vindicated in our life. And in that way, we will become our own spiritual master, not in defiance of our spiritual master, but in continuance of what the spiritual master has taught. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes. Very loudly.
You said that instincts, which an animal does, they are acquired characteristics that come from genes. But that is understanding about instincts that they are also like a guidance of the Lord from the instinct. Is that entirely wrong?
Yeah, so the question is, are our instincts inherited characteristics that come from the genes, or are they the guidance of the super soul? The two are not contradictory, they are complementary. See, the super soul, when he works in this world, it's not that he works in a vacuum. He works through material mechanisms. So that means, even if we look at genes, biologists tend to ascribe omnipotence to genes, as if they can do everything. Genes are like the new god of the atheists. But the capacity of the genes is limited. Ultimately, see, genes are like computer codes, very sophisticated computer code, the gene can become a program which can do a lot. But then a computer program requires a computer to run it. It also has to be written by someone. So a computer program doesn't operate on its own in isolation. So it requires a person who programmed it, and it requires a medium where the programming can work. The program itself doesn't generate everything. It may generate a little bit, something it can generate. But there has to be a basic framework where it will operate. So that means genes have certain capacities. But it's not that they can do everything. So how things work is, for the animals, their instincts are something which is in many ways a scientific mystery. Because, for example, when there are birds which migrate, so when the birds migrate, often a bird can be blindfolded and taken 100 miles away from its nest, and it's released. Then it just climbs up, turns around, rotates for a few rounds, and it straight goes back towards its nest. Now how does it know? How does it know? It's very difficult. So maybe it sees some stars, and maybe it looks at the stars and understands. But they are able to do it even when there are clouds. Then they thought that maybe there is some kind of magnetic material in their brain itself, because of which they are able to align with the Earth's magnetic compass, and thereby they are able to find out. But often, many of the birds, they have such tiny brains that it's very unlikely that they will have something like this. And actually, not only that they are able to do that, but it's like some birds, they have very short lives. So for example, they live for only 6 months or something like that. So the parents live in one part of the world. Then when they grow old, so they have nests over here, then they migrate towards the end of their life to another part of the world, and then they live over there, and then their progeny, when the season changes, they come back, and the progeny come back to the same nest. Now how could they have come back? So this is inconceivable, because genes are not changed by our experience. Now if a bird had built a nest, that will be stored in the brain cells. That information won't go to the genes. So the brain cells are not passed down. Genes are passed down from one generation to another. It's quite inconceivable. So what I'm saying is that even if we talk about genes are not a complete explanation. But in normal situations, that it's not the super soul has to work through a vacuum. The super soul creates systems, mechanisms by which things work. So genes is one mechanism through which the super soul works. That means every living being is given by the super soul the intelligence to survive, for eating, sleeping, mating, defending. And one aspect of that intelligence is the instincts that they have. Because the instinct guide them away from danger, guide them towards food, and that's how they learn, or that's how they survive basically. So the super soul, it's not that the super soul has to actively be involved in everything. Now, the efficient management, it said, is that management where everything is managed and there is no manager required or visibly required. Everything goes going smoothly. Now anybody who's a good manager knows that nothing goes smoothly on its own. Everything they have, actually often practical things go wrong so often. But good management means that everything is going so smoothly and appears as if no one is there. So somebody who is also a good manager, that person will understand if everything is going on very nicely with nobody's management, nobody's apparent management, that person will understand, oh, that means this manager must be very good. Not that there is no manager. So anybody who says that there is no manager, that person we should tell them we have done no management. That's why you think like this. So the super soul is a very efficient manager, and he sets up systems. So one of the systems is instincts. Okay. So instincts and super soul guidance, they are complementary explanations. Hare Krishna. So how can we increase our tolerance to temptations, isn't it? So basically it's a matter of choosing. And that choosing becomes easier when we don't have quick access to the indulgence. That's why just having some external obstacle to indulging in temptation, not having the temptation easily available for indulging in, that itself is the first step. Tasmat tam indriyanya adau niyamya bharatarshana. Krishna says in 3.41, he talks first what we have to do is indriyanya adau, regulate the senses. Regulate the senses means, now one important part of regulating senses is don't keep sense gratification very easily available. In America now people have ready access to guns. It's a complex issue, gun laws, but one problem is that when people have access to guns, somebody just gets angry and picks up the gun, shoots somebody. So what happens is if we have ways in which we can succumb to the temptation very easily available, then it's much more difficult to resist. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, in general, it's something which we can learn from experience. When a firefighter goes for the first time, or the big fire is there, at that time, if a civilian is there, civilian will see the fire, I'll start panicking only, because there's no training over there. But then, if a new Tyros firefighter is there, a firefighter goes there with the hose, drops the hose, panics. But then, over a period of time, as the training comes, then when the fire comes, okay, let's put water over here, let's put water over here. Then it works in a coordinated way, trained way. And the difference between a new firefighter and an experienced firefighter is the reflex time becomes lesser and lesser. The reflex time, what to do becomes so trained, ingrained, that whenever the fire comes, okay, the person knows, okay, if we attack the fire from this side, this is the best way to subside it. Like, okay, do this, and learn. So like that, lust is like a fire that burns in our heart. Dushpure analena cha. Krishna says in 3rd chapter of the Gita, Dushpure analena. Analena is fire. Dushpurena is very difficult to satisfy the fire. So when the fire of lust burns in our heart, what happens is we will become panicky. Oh, now the desire has come, now what can I do? I'll have to succumb. No, we don't have to succumb. So as we make spiritual advancement, our reflex actions will become faster. Our spiritual reflexes will become sharper. And then we'll know, okay, let me chant Hare Krishna. Let me study some scripture. Or what we could do is, we can find out some passages from scriptures which talk about the nature of lust. Something which is we hear some point in some lecture, that's a very illuminating point for us. So have it somewhere in a pocket diary, or just memorize it, repeat the words, repeat the sentence, and then contemplate on it, chant Hare Krishna. So we can find out what will work as a fire extinguisher for me. So there are two things in this. First is I should have a fire extinguisher, and I should use the fire extinguisher. So both are required. So we have to be equipped and we have to be trained. So we can individually find out what acts as a fire extinguisher for us. The holy name in general can act, but what happens is, when the temptation comes, we lose the desire to take shelter of the holy name. Okay, put it aside. So no need to chant. So at that time we use our intelligence. So if some spiritual passage we remember, like that will help us. So each of us can find out what will be our fire extinguisher, and then we train ourselves to use it. So that way, over a period of time, our tolerance will increase. So tolerance is essentially a matter of spiritual reflexes. So the more we contemplate and plan, contemplate not on sense gratification, but contemplate on how we fall for sense gratification and plan how we can deal with it, gradually our reflexes will become stronger. Certainly we need to pray to Krishna and seek his help. And the help he gives is not just that overnight the temptation will go away, but he will give us the intelligence to deal with the temptation. And to the extent we deal with the temptation, to that extent he will say, okay, if you're not interested in this, then I won't tempt you with this. And over a period of time, we'll be able to transcend. Okay? Hare Krishna.
Genes doesn't affect subtle body. For example, if due to my genes, I got some fever or something. So due to that, I feel very mentally it is affecting my subtle body.
Due to my genes, you have some mood. What exactly?
Genes doesn't affect subtle body. So, for example, if I have some problem, health problem or something, that is due to genes. So, I feel very unhappy so that my subtle body affects.
Okay. So the question is, we say that genes don't affect our subtle body, but because of genes I may get some physical health problem, and because of that health problem I may get upset, I may get emotionally disturbed. So isn't it affecting that way? Yes, ultimately we can say it does affect that way. Now when we talk about the distinction between the subtle body and the gross body, in terms of ontology means nature of existence. It's clear. The mind is subtle matter, whereas earth, water, fire, everything, they are gross matter. But in terms of functioning, the subtle body and the gross body work together. That means what happens in the mind, it affects the brain also. So what we have to do is, the important point is not to go into a hair-splitting analysis of what is the cause. The focus should be on what is the solution. So whether it is because of my genes that I have a physical problem because of which I am predisposed towards say irritability or towards depression, whatever, I have to find out what is the way I can deal with it. So Krishna consciousness offers us spiritual stimuli, and when we have spiritual stimuli, they give us strength, and by that strength we can counter the effects of temptation. Okay. So they have a program at 7, so we'll have some 2-3 short questions and we'll finish off. Yes.
Actually, there is something so that we stop discriminating between these two whatever gender is there, so that this since we discriminate, that's why this problem comes.
Discriminate between?
Between suppose gender and this is about this woman, this man. So when we start discriminating, then this next step comes that we start doing this last and all this thing. Can we avoid the discrimination?
Okay. So, in order to avoid agitation by lust, can we avoid discrimination between male and female? Or what is the way to basically avoid lust? Actually, we can't artificially avoid the discrimination between male and female. Because at the advanced level, we see the soul. And then we can see beyond the body. But at the conditioned stage, there has to be difference between the gender. And that's why the Vedic culture has some level of gender separation. And now it may not be possible to have the same level of gender separation in our work life. But then we can have our own code of conduct. We don't have to be frivolous with members of the opposite sex. And over a period of time, we will see that basically they are also human beings like us, except that their biological form is different. And their psychological tendencies are slightly different. So, at an intellectual level, we can understand that the mind may imagine a lot. But basically, the body is made of the same earth, water, fire, air. So intellectually we can understand that actually whatever pleasure I am imagining, there is no pleasure over there. No special pleasure is there. Because it's essentially the same matter everywhere, in all forms. So intellectually based on that, whenever we have some unavoidable interaction, we can minimize the agitation because of that. But along with that, it's very important to know that there has to be some level of distance. Now how much that will be functionally, that will vary depending on one's situation in life. But that's we at an intellectual level understand there's just earth, water, fire, there's no need to get excited. But beyond that, we culturally keep a safe distance as much as possible. And over a period of time, we will be able to transit. And then there can be the capacity to see beyond the body. But first, we have to intellectually understand and culturally protect ourselves. Yes. Okay.
Although I don't have control over my body, we don't have control over our body directly. So actually we are spiritual and we cannot have we cannot lord over the materialism. So I don't, if I wish to Paramatma only,
Hold the mic a little bit away.
to Paramatma only, we function so that I wish to live my hand and my hand is there. So how does the senses work? I mean, but I'm feeling this is going to brain. It is always the connection between the soul and the subtle body.
Okay. So the question is, how do our senses work? If I touch something and say feel it cold, we know that the soul can't interact with matter directly. It's through the super soul. So do all these sensations happen through the super soul? Yes. Krishna describes in the Bhagavad-Gita that Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hrideshya Ajudishni Brahman Sarvabhutani Yantrarudhani Maya. This yantra in 18.61 he says that this is made of Maya. And he is situated as super soul who is guiding the wanderings of all living beings. So for example, when I want to speak right now, speech is a technological miracle. There are many, in computers there are speech synthesizing softwares. Now sometimes the computer can read out a book. If you put a text in it, text to speech converter is there. But then it cannot come anywhere near the level of modulation, emotional emphasis, pauses and accentuation that is there in human speech. So now when I want to speak, all that I do is I desire to speak. But after that, how exactly my desire to speak gets translated into speech, I don't know that. You know, if I go to some throat specialist and then I ask him, it's a whole complex mechanism. So who is running that mechanism? That is actually the super soul. So in our body there are voluntary and involuntary functions, and a lot of the functions are involuntary. They require control and coordination, but we don't control and coordinate them. Who does it? It's the super soul who does it. So in our functioning with our senses, we depend on the super soul. So even for our sense gratification, we need Krishna. It is not that we need Krishna for our spiritual advancement. We need him even for sense gratification. Without him, we would not be able to perceive attractive objects. Without him, we would not be able to activate our senses. And without him, there would be no pleasure. So therefore, for everything, we depend on Krishna. And Krishna, when he sees the desire, how it works is, the soul desires, the super soul sanctions, and the material nature executes. So our desire is sensed by the super soul, and after that the material nature executes. And that's how everything that happens, the super soul is the medium through which it happens. Thank you. One last question. Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to just ask the principles of tolerances which you have already
Little further away. Yeah.
the principles of tolerances which you have mentioned for control the fall down, are they able to follow?
Are they?
Able to follow?
Okay. The question is, are the causes that lead to fall down, are they also applicable to falling away?
The way to increase the tolerance and counteract.
Okay, if we counteract, whatever techniques that we use to counteract fall down, do they apply to falling away also? Yes, definitely. Because, in fact, our conditionings can cause us to fall down. They cannot cause us to fall away. Falling away happens when we become discouraged. So, when we think, oh, I cannot practice bhakti, then only we'll fall away. We fall down because of the force of our conditioning. When some temptations come and we do something wrong. But what after that? After that, we can still keep practicing bhakti. And we keep practicing bhakti, we'll become purified. So actually, we can say that, okay, my past conditionings are responsible for my fall down. But for my falling away, I am responsible. Nobody can force me to give up devotional service. No matter how terrible my conditionings are, no conditioning controls us 24 hours a day that it doesn't allow us even so much freedom to chant Hare Krishna. No conditioning is so bad that it can make devotional life entirely impossible. So a little bit will be possible for us. And whatever little bit is possible, we do that much and gradually our capacity will increase. Suppose somebody's got a hand fracture and the person is told initially don't move any hands. But when it's told to start moving, okay, first you start just moving your finger. Then you start moving all your fingers. Then you start moving your palm. Then you start moving your forearm. Then you move your full arm. So like that, because of our conditionings, we may not have too much capacity to practice devotional service right now. But whatever little capacity we have, we exercise that, and by that we will keep moving forward. And as we use that capacity will increase. And as the capacity increases, we will move further in our spiritual life. Okay? Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhaktivedanta ki jai. Gaur Prema.